It's early morning there in Colombo. There have been incredible scenes of those protests that we've witnessed. What's it been like there for you over the past 24 hours? What have you seen and experienced?
Thank you for having me, Miriam. I mean, things are extremely unprecedented here and uncertain. I mean, yesterday we saw massive crowds coming into Colombo. And this was in a context where many don't have fuel and they were walking for hours to reach the epicenter of the protest site. And we also saw the protesters breaching the presidential residence, the official residence, and the office. And it was quite remarkable to see all of this after months-long protests. Unfortunately, the protests turned violent yesterday, and there was the torching of the Prime Minister's private residence. Extremely unfortunate, the turn of events. And now we are told that the President and the Prime Minister have promised to resign, but we have not seen the resignation yet. So extremely uncertain times as to what's going to happen in Sri Lanka.
Uncertain indeed, given that, it's not yet taken place with those resignations being offered. You point there to the violence that escalated in the protests that we've seen in the last 24 hours. Police were using tear gas in some instances, water cannon. Are you concerned there for people's safety, given the amount of uncertainty that remains?
Definitely. I mean, we saw tear gas being used against protesters yesterday as well. And there was also assault on several protesters. Several have been hospitalized. But this has been seen in the last few months as well. So we need to recognize while the protests have been largely peaceful, there has been violence used. There was on the 9th of May violence that led to deaths as well and destruction of property. So there are very worrying signs in terms of what has happened in the last few weeks, but specifically yesterday. And there is a question of the law and order situation in a context where there is a political vacuum. So there has to be extreme caution used in terms of what happens next. But one thing is certain is that the demand for the president and the prime minister to resign has led to this. And I hope there is urgent steps taken by both to heed the calls of the people. The president has said he will resign by Wednesday, the 13th. That's a long time away considering the tenuous situation on the ground. So next couple of days, next couple of hours are extremely critical in Sri Lanka.
What do you imagine might be the next steps, given that we don't have clarity yet on a transition there for power in Sri Lanka? What are the possibilities that we might see?
Well, at the moment, we only have the promises of resignation by the president and the prime minister. So the first thing needs to be that they need to resign. It's been very clear that they don't have the support or the legitimacy to govern. Now, the speaker called the party leaders for a meeting yesterday. There was consensus that both the president and the prime minister needs to leave, and a letter was sent in that regard, and things have followed since then. So the speaker becomes acting president as soon as both the president and the prime minister resigns, and there has to be then it's a matter before parliament. This is provided in the constitution. So the constitution provides for specific measures that can be taken for an interim president and a government to be established. But it's very clear that in the last few months, the protests and the lack of ability to govern shows that there needs to be a fresh mandate by the people. So we need to have elections in the next couple of months as well. So, there's a couple of things that will have to move on the political front. But this is also in a context of a very dire economic crisis in Sri Lanka.
In view of the very dire circumstances, as you say there, Bhavani Fonseca, regarding the economy, which of course has, been the impetus for the protests that we're seeing, What sort of support might be provided from the international community to help buffer Sri Lanka as it moves through this period? We already have those discussions underway involving the International Monetary Fund. Are there other things that the international community could be doing to help support Sri Lanka?
So as you rightly said, we are in a dire economic situation. I mean, there's long lines to get essential items, long lines to get fuel, power cuts, extremely difficult times, but this situation has been there for several months. Now, the IMF is in discussion. They were in Sri Lanka. There are others who've been also supporting Sri Lanka. The Australian government also has pledged to provide both humanitarian and development assistance. Now, assistance is extremely important at this moment. There's high inflation and people are struggling to get basic necessities. So definitely we need the humanitarian assistance, but also we need to factor in support in terms of political stability. So the international community needs to support both in terms of the urgent needs, but also in terms of ensuring long-term stability in Sri Lanka. So a whole host of challenges on the ground, and definitely a need to get assistance from different quarters in Sri Lanka.
Bhavani Fonseca, human rights lawyer in Colombo, an incredibly difficult time there for you and for so many Sri Lankans. We thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us and share your insights and your valuable experiences. Thank you.
Thank you.